I'm going to call to order the Norfolk Annual Town Meeting. My name is Jason Tallerman. I am your moderator. I hereby declare that the warrant has been duly posted and published and that the reading of the warrant is waived. First off, thank you all for your patience and understanding with the circumstances that bring us here a month and a half behind at an unusual place. Mostly, thank you for being here and doing the important business of the town. We have, as of right now, about 250 people on a Saturday, hot Saturday morning in June. I think that's quite a feat. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank the staff of King Philip for hosting us, Paul Zinni, Larry Azer, and most of all, Joe Zahner and his incredible team for setting this all up. If we can give them a round of applause. Amazing partnership with them. They didn't have to do any of this, and they were with us every step of the way when we moved from the auditorium to the cafeteria to the football field. They've been terrific, and we're lucky to have them all. Flag is way over there. If we could all stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, justice, and liberty. Thank you very much. As is our custom and tradition, since I became the moderator, we take some time at town meeting to honor those who have passed since last year and who have given service to the town. Catherine Loundis, and I apologize for any mispronunciations, and I also apologize if we missed anyone. She was on the Personnel Board. Gretchen Sullivan, who worked with H. Olive Day. Linda Andrews, Norfolk School Committee. Joan Dooley, Assessor's Office. James Murray, Plumbing Inspector. Frank Gross, Moderator, and many other roles. Graham Sterling, Advisory Committee. Marion Graham, the Norfolk Public Library. In the midst of this pandemic, where we struggle on a daily basis to cope with the enormous suffering, it's important that we honor those who have passed and understand the sacrifices they have made to serve the public good. But I'd also be remiss if I didn't recognize the daily struggles and suffering of our black and brown friends, neighbors, and countrymen who endure near constant injustice and inequality. Too many people have lost their lives due to systemic racism that pervades even our most cherished institutions. People like Emmett Till, Eric Garner, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Michael Brown, Walter Scott, Philando Castile, and countless others. A moment of silence is not enough for those we knew and those we never got to know, but I ask that we each give them that much here now. If I could have a moment of silence. Thank you. So let me just introduce a few folks who are helping out today with our annual festivities. To my left, Carol Green, our town clerk. Assistant Town Clerk Anthony Turry is down on the track. He will help with any motions to amend and otherwise help Carol and I keep order here. To my right, the chairperson of the Select Board, Kevin Calcutt. To his right is Blythe Robinson, our town administrator. And we have Town Council Peter Mello and our Finance Director Todd Lindmark. In the front row, we have Cece Van Tine on the Select Board and our newest Select Board member, Anita Mecklenburg. I think it's important to note that to the best of our ability and research, this is the first majority woman Select Board this town has ever had, and I think that's worthy of a round of applause. Our advisory board, which will be making most of the motions tonight, is also in the front row here. Arthur Frontsack is the chairperson, and the rest of the advisory board is kind of fanned out across the front row, and they'll be making most of the motions here today. I have a few people that I've asked to serve as tellers if, in fact, we have to count votes today. And to the extent that I may have to step down due to conflict, I've asked Jim Lehan to serve as my deputy moderator. Jim, can you raise your hand there? Some rules for town meeting. We are governed by town meeting time, a local parliamentary procedure in Massachusetts, and local bylaws. I'll explain procedures as needed. I'll also recognize requests for points of order if you don't understand exactly what we are proceeding with or what the motion is on the floor or what it means. All motions will be made by the advisory board with the exception of petition motions. I think we have one that is moving forward today, and that will be made by the petitioner. We do honor and respect motions for indefinite postponement. You'll hear that a few times today. That is a motion essentially to take no action on an article, and it essentially dismisses that article. That is the traditional device we use here in Norfolk. Those who make the motions will have the first opportunity to explain the basis of their motion and the reason for the article. If you have a motion to amend or substitute an article, it generally must be in writing, provided that I will allow friendly motions to amend if it's just a small clerical error. If you need to put it in writing, again, Anthony Turry is down in the front row, the furthest from me, and he has some forms that you can fill out. I hope that some people come and speak tonight as needed. We are on a little bit of a time clock, but we should have discussion where you see fit to make a statement, and I will try and balance that discussion as best I can. The microphones are a little sensitive. There's a little delay, so try not to listen to yourself and just make your statement, and that should come through. Please respect social distance as you come to a mic. We haven't painted out things on the floor. There's the main mic, if you want to make comments, is right here in front of me, and just try and respect everyone's distance. If you remain seated, I leave it to you. If you want to take your mask off while you remain seated and socially distanced, that is fine. If you get up and come to the mic or otherwise leave your seat to do something, and please respect everyone else's space and wear a mask. Everyone's going to have a chance to speak on a matter, but at a certain point, I want to avoid repetition. This is especially true today as we aim for brevity. Normal is max of 5 minutes the first time of the mic, 3 minutes the second time. Do not be surprised, however, today if I hurry folks along a little bit. I may allow someone with brand new info to speak a third time, but by bylaw, I can limit that as I see fit. All comments and questions through the moderator. Come up to a mic. When you do come up to a mic, give your name and your street address at least the first time you speak. I hope we have some spirited debate, but please, we have as always, have some challenging issues. Be respectful and no personal comments. They will not be tolerated. I want to hear facts and your opinions. I do not want to hear what you think someone else's opinion is. We have a whole bunch of local officials here today, and between myself and them, we will try and get any questions answered. Today, in lieu of asking for a voice vote, which I normally do, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. It's just simple, put one hand in the air. If I still can't count, or if 7 voters think that the count is in doubt, then I will have you stand. And if we still can't figure it out, then we will count the vote as necessary. I do respect a call of the question, or to cut off debate. However, if there are people lined up at the mic, I may let them speak before we take a vote on that motion, and that is a 2/3 vote. Similarly, if I hear a lot of the same comment over and over again, I may cut off debate on my own. There's a whole bunch of handouts. We don't have video here today. I hope everyone grabbed a handout. If you didn't, they are out there in the boxes, and you can go and grab one. A key one that you may want to have is the budget, which we'll be discussing in a little bit. Finally, in the effort of achieving some brevity here, I'd like to dispense, if the town meeting would allow me, with motions for reconsideration. A motion for reconsideration is usually a device used to lock in a vote. I have found in the town of Norfolk, in my time as moderator, that's all it's been used for. I don't think we have to rely on that this year to lock it in. If I could have a show of hands and a majority vote to allow the suspension of allowing motions to reconsider, if you want to put your hands up in the air. And all those opposed who want to retain motions to reconsider. Okay, so the ayes have it, and we will suspend motions for reconsideration for this town meeting and this town meeting only. A lot of business to be conducted. We got a little bit of a late start because of the line, but I still think we can probably wrap this up in an hour and a half and get everyone out of here and to the beach right after noon today. So, with that, there is no motion required for Article 1. The next item we have is another effort at brevity, and it's called a consent calendar. That exists in our bylaws, but I don't usually use it because I think that when we're indoors, we can usually get through the meeting in 3 or 4 hours. But it's a way of taking one vote and combining several routine articles that normally have no comment or discussion or controversy whatsoever. So in order to expedite the consideration of routine items, Articles 6, 7, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, and 19 will be considered for approval in a single vote without debate. I'm going to read each article's number and its title, and if a member of the meeting rises to say hold, I'll take it out of the consent calendar and we'll hear it in the normal course. The remaining articles will be moved by Arthur Fronczak of the Advisory Board as printed in the warrant. So, again, if you would rather discuss any of these and have discussion, just put your hand up and say hold. Article 6, the Water Enterprise Fund Budget. Article 7, the Wastewater Enterprise Fund Budget. Article 13, spending limits for annual revolving funds. Article 14 is the administrative CPA budget. That's Community Preservation Act. Article 15 is the annual 10% set-asides for the community preservation budget. Again, not project-specific, just required set-asides. Article 17 is our Chapter 90 funds, an annual article where we just recognize that we're going to be getting reimbursement from the state. Article 18, the ability of the Select Board to accept grants. Article 19, the ability of the Select Board to dispose of surplus property, not land, surplus property. Okay, seeing no holds, Mr. Fronczak.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve all articles on the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded with a show of hands. All those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it, and it is a vote. Thank you very much for that indulgence. Article 2, Mr. Lutz.
The advisory committee recommends indefinite postponement of this article.
Seconded.
That's a motion, Mr. Lutz?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Lutz, care to explain?
This article is a standard authorization to allow the town to cover unpaid bills from previous years. There are no unpaid bills pending at this time.
Any further discussion on Article 2? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hands. All those opposed? The matter is indefinitely postponed. Article 3, transfers. Mr. Fronczak.
Mr. Moderator, before I make this motion, I just wanted to take a quick second to comment on a transfer that brings me great sadness. Susan Jacobson is actually leaving as the administrative assistant to the advisory committee. She's served for over 10 years. So just quickly, I wanted to express the deepest thanks on behalf of the advisory committee for all of the painstaking work and devotion, especially this year, that you provided. So thank you, and you will continue as Director of Affordable Housing. So thank you for your good work there. Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 3 as printed in the handout.
That handout is the PowerPoint slides that you all received when you were getting in. It lists the transfers. Mr. Fronczak.
The transfers that we see are pretty typical. I defer and move over to the town administrator or the finance director for any commentary.
I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about these.
Any questions, comments, need for discussion on these transfers under Article 3? Seeing none, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? It does pass. Article 4, compensation schedule adjustments. Mr. Frontak.
Mr. Moderator, I move to indefinitely postpone Article 4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Frontak.
The advisory committee deferred voting on this until this morning. We unanimously approved the IP at the request of the town administrator.
Any questions, comments, discussion on Article 4? Seeing none, it requires a majority vote. All those in favor of indefinite postponement, raise your hand. All those opposed? It does pass. It is indefinitely postponed. Article 5. So this brings us to the omnibus budget. So I'll explain the procedure that we're going to have here. There was a handout as you came in, and that is the preliminary budget fiscal year 2021 that has details in it, and we will be breaking that down. This is how we're going to proceed. Mr. Frontak's going to make a motion. Then our town administrator is going to make a brief presentation. Then if they want, KP and Norfolk schools can say a few words in support of their budget. Then I'm going to read large categories of the budget. The budget is much more detailed than the categories that I have. If you have a question about any specific line item in the budget, then say hold when I read the large departmental category, and you can discuss any one of the items you want to hold. The caveat this year is this: in the interest of brevity and to get everyone home, if you have a number of holds, you're going to do them all at once. And Carol and I will try and keep track of who is holding items. Once we hold and discuss them, we'll take a vote on the whole budget, subject to any motions to amend. Mr. Frontak.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town fix the compensation of the elected town clerk at $78,399.44 as provided for by the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 108, for the fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2020, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $43,097,598 to defray the departmental and incidental expenses of the town not otherwise provided for the fiscal year commencing on July 1st, 2020.
Second. Ms. Robinson.
Good morning. I'm going to be speaking today from a PowerPoint presentation that has, on the first page, the Town of Norfolk seal, and then at the bottom, our pre-pandemic budget. And as the moderator said, my goal this morning is brevity so that nobody out there gets a sunburn. So we've narrowed it down to 10 slides, and it seems like the liquid sunshine's not coming for a couple of hours. That's great. So this year was different for many reasons. First, we had myself, fairly new, arrived just about a little over a year ago, last year, and we had a fairly new select board. So that caused us to spend some time over the year really digging into the budget. And we started with looking at our capital needs and identifying what those are going to be in the coming years, whether they're roads, which many people have commented on, our buildings, our equipment, our trucks. And we put that budget together. We're not taking up any of those items this morning, but it's important to understand what we're going to need to spend money on to maintain the infrastructure that the town has invested in over the years. That was followed by what we thought was going to be a somewhat typical budget process, and that started in late in the year. With a fairly new select board, we spent a lot of time going through the budget and having an all-day meeting in February to help bring everyone up to speed about what is really involved in the budget. And that was, I think, a very good exercise because it helped everybody, learn more about their budget and what goes into it. It also gave us some good detail about what we might need to change later if we found that things were not quite what we were planning to spend, and that's exactly what happened. So we did put together a pre-pandemic budget, as we're calling it, and that's on slide 2. That was an increase overall of 2.43% for next year, which is the lowest increase that the town would have seen in probably the last 5 or 6 years, as I recall. That budget did accomplish a number of things. It financed both school budgets at meeting their needs for a level service budget. For the Norfolk schools, a 4.2% increase, and for KP, a 3.5% increase. And for the town, there were some adjustments both up and down, but overall it met the town's needs as well. But as the pandemic started to take hold in early March, we had to stop and rethink all of that. And so we did that, working closely with Norfolk schools. We analyzed what information or lack of information we were getting from the state because they were grappling with the same things we are at a much different level, and concern about what the shutdown as it started to happen would mean to our local receipts. Also talked to a lot of our other communities around us, trying to understand what everybody else was doing. And there's 351 communities in Massachusetts, and all of them, I think, are doing something slightly different. So that was helpful and not. But at the end of the day, we felt it was responsible to reduce both our state revenues, which we have done. And as I sit here today, we still don't have a state budget that helps us understand where our revenues are going to be from there. And we've made some estimates to reduce our local receipts, and together it was an overall 10.8% decrease from what we previously planned. So slide 4 shows you what in this budget that we're proposing today, where those general revenue categories are. This budget still plans on a 2.5% tax increase, as well as it accounts for the new growth for either new homes or renovations or changes to our overall tax base. The local receipts are down because of what I've just mentioned, generally in the categories of excise taxes, building permit revenue, and a large item for the town is what's called prison mitigation. The state has traditionally provided communities that have prisons in their communities with a revenue offset, which for Norfolk last year was about $250,000. We're making the assumption that money is not going to be available. So, and then we also made a conscious decision to spend less of our, quote, free cash. That has been on the decline for the past 5 years, which is a very good thing for the community to not spend that to balance the budget. And it went down from $233,000 to $124,000. And so on the next slide, on slide 5, you can see that overall, a little bit more of a breakdown on state aid. We've assumed a reduction in Chapter 70, which is a primary revenue for schools. Our unrestricted government aid down, and state land. I will take 1 second to explain why our assessments are up. We have seen an addition of, I think, 15 new students going to the Benjamin Franklin Charter School in Franklin, and that's an interesting formula that I won't bore you trying to explain, but basically what it means is that the town receives less revenue, so that can be sent to that school for those children. It's about $14,000 or $15,000 per student, so that's a main reason why the estimated assessments have gone up. Conversely, the state also recognizes that there's still some cost to keep the bricks and mortar buildings that you have, even though the students have left, and that's why the charter school tuition is up. So overall, a decrease of 6.45%, which leads us to the budget that we have today. That's in slide 6, and overall, the budget is the Chairman of the Advisory Committee mentioned, $43,097,598. That is a 0.36% increase, and it's a reduction from where we were of $983,000. That's what the 10.8% reduction in state and local receipts is worth. And so you can see the various categories and adjustments we've made, and I'll go into a little more detail on what those are in a following slide. So how do we come up with a $983,000 change? That's on slide 7. There's 4 categories. First of all, earlier this calendar year, the state approached the Regional Emergency Communications Center, the MEC as we call it, and asked us to consider taking on 2 new towns, the towns of Millville and Mendon. We've worked through that process, and the Board of Directors of the MEC signed that agreement the week before last. That means that the state is going to provide us with a grant for over 4 years. In the first 2 years, they are going to completely cover the MEC's expenses for all 4 towns, and enables us to reduce our budget by a total of just over $380,000. We're not using all of that money at this point. We're leaving a small amount in our budget for the first quarter payment in case we need to make it. But that came off the top. So then we're left with about $600,000 we had to figure out how to reduce. We worked collaboratively with both of our schools and looking at the rest of our budget overall and our fixed costs. We figured out the percentage difference between town and school. School in total being about 67% of our overall budget. We split those accordingly. So the town of Norfolk reduction is about $205,000. Norfolk Public Schools just under $285,000, and King Philip Regional just under $113,000. And so, giving you some more detail on slide 8 about what we did to get there. For the town, we eliminated a public works position. We have free retirements in the police department, which enabled us to hire new police officers at different points this next year at a lower cost. We've received some savings from our health insurance carrier, some concessions by non-union employees and salary increases for next year, and refinanced some older debt from the town that enabled us to do that at a lower cost. For Norfolk schools, they are eliminating some new positions, not filling some open positions, and took another look at some expense line items. And for KP, their overall increase next year is going to be 2.5% instead of what they'd originally requested from the 3 towns, which is just 3.5%. They have made some adjustments there, and I think it's important for everyone to know that all 3 towns support this 2.5% increase for them, and in fact, Rentham, when they had their town meeting here on Monday night, passed that budget. And so on the next slide, I'm just giving you a little bit more detail on the town side. Besides what I've mentioned previously before we got to this budget, we already eliminated another DPW position at in the management level, and we had proposed some summer staff we have removed. The library will has eliminated Sunday hours this year and reduced Saturday hours, and we had also made some, again, earlier changes in the budget to remove a part-time IT position, some hours in our assessor's office, and a position for mechanical inspector. So here we are at a 0.36% budget increase. I only went back to 2009, but it's the lowest budget the town has had in that much time and probably years before. And I think what's important for everyone to understand is that this is the budget we would really like you to pass. It is maybe not the ideal budget, but it's one that we think is responsible and will help us continue to provide the services that residents expect. It's not a good thing that we had to change town meeting to this morning, but it's a good thing in that we got some new information from the state on Thursday about school resources, and I think both the superintendents can give you some more understanding about that. But I think what's important also for everyone to understand is that we're not done with the budget. We're done for today. We need to move forward into July. That's really important, especially for schools, to be able to make plans and get open for whatever exactly being open means in the fall and know what they're planning. But we're going to be doing this again in the fall. We're waiting to find out what the state revenue is really going to be. We're going to take a look at the town's local receipts and how they're tracking. We also need to look at what's it going to cost to open school. While there is money from state and federal government to pay for that, and they've been paying for some of that already, there's still more we need to learn. I mentioned earlier, we talked about capital. Even in a tough budget year, there's still things that the town needs to invest wisely. So we'll be bringing some capital expenditures to you in the fall. And then depending on all of that, should the town look at some of its rainy day funds to balance the budget in the fall? And are we going to be able to restore some things, or are we going to have to make some further cuts? I wish I could stand here and tell you all those things now. That would be great, but I can't because we just don't know. But I would urge everybody to think about considering this budget and letting us move forward here and knowing that we're going to continue to work hard on it and bring changes to you in the fall. So thank you, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Does either Norfolk Public Schools or, when we come on up, Paul and Ingrid? What's that? The microphone right here. Norfolk Public Schools, you can go first.
Colin got ahead of you. So good morning, and thank you everybody for coming out for town meeting on a Saturday morning in this heat. I wanted to start by thanking all of our parents and community members for your continued support and patience during this extended school closure and our district's transition to remote learning. We recognize that has been a dramatic shift for both our students, for our staff, and for all of our families. I've been really fortunate that I've heard from so many of you about the outstanding job that our teachers have done in rising to this challenge and continuing to provide rich learning opportunities in a very different situation. I've also heard from parents about teachers who've gone above and beyond to connect with students, to provide social emotional support and engagement with education. So a tribute. We're privileged to have such a dedicated, innovative, creative staff with us. We also want to recognize the parents. We know that for families at home who've been juggling work responsibilities, childcare responsibilities, running a household, you've become your child's second teacher, a role many have never sought, but were forced to take on and did it brilliantly. So thank you for all of our families. As most of you are aware, we did present our budget at a public budget hearing back in March. We had a great turnout, so thank you to everybody that attended. And as Blythe mentioned, at that time, we were looking at just over a 4% increase to operate the schools. Since April, with the closure of schools and the pandemic, the state as well as the country have experienced significant economic shortfalls. The state's projecting about a $6 billion shortfall in revenue that has impacted dramatically local towns' resources and abilities to fund operating budgets. So back in April, the select board actually requested that the schools look for about just over $250,000 of reductions in order to help balance that budget and offset the potential and expected revenue shortfalls. We were able to make those reductions in Norfolk without impacting any positions. What we decided to do at that time was to not move forward with filling new positions that were proposed in the budget. So there was an assistant principal position, an increase in a special education team chair position. We also decided to not fill a technology position that was retiring, and we made some cuts across the board in expense lines. So we were able to balance that initial shortfall without any reductions to positions, which is what was presented to advisory board and select board back in April. Over the last probably 5 to 6 weeks, the district has incurred some significant unexpected budget costs for special education services, and we're working on a plan for determining the impact on staffing and program needs. We've also experienced at the state level projections for significantly more cuts to state aid. So the state is now projecting potentially between 10 and 20% shortfalls for Chapter 70 and for circuit breaker reimbursement. And additionally, with the Department of Education delaying guidance coming out to schools, it put us in almost an impossible situation in terms of being able to evaluate what the potential cost would be of a safe reopening. Fortunately, we did get guidance issued just 2 days ago from the Department of Education, which I shared out with all of our parents. We are very, very hopeful that if the COVID cases in Massachusetts continue to trend down and hospitalizations continue to trend down, and there's not a dramatic shift in what the disease presentation looks like in the Commonwealth, we will be able to welcome our students back into in-building learning in September, which I'm sure everybody shares my joy in being able to say that. Again, we have incurred some unexpected costs, as I said, and that did require the district to issue reduction in force notices to 16 of our non-professional status teachers, and that was really due to the budget uncertainty and the fact, additionally, that the town had to delay town meeting. So until town meeting and town meeting vote, we do not actually have a certified operating budget. So that was another factor. We did receive some positive news, as Blythe mentioned yesterday, from the governor's office, that there is going to be 2 major new grants available for public education. One is for a $25 million matching grant for purchasing technology, which will help many, many districts across the Commonwealth. We did have to, in order to balance the budget, make some reductions to our technology program, and that may give us additional revenue to meet those needs. There's also $200 million now available, estimated about $225 per student, to public education to help offset the costs of COVID-19 and implementing safety protocols. So that, at this point, we are in a better position than we were back in June as far as our budget. There's still a lot of uncertainty, as Blythe mentioned. The state has not finalized their Chapter 70 funding. They haven't finalized state grants, which has actually a more dramatic impact on the King Philip schools than it does on the Norfolk schools. They rely more heavily on Chapter 70 aid from 3 different towns, and that aid goes directly to King Philip, where ours goes to the town and then is appropriated. So there is still uncertainty, but we are optimistic that if the town does vote to move ahead and certify the budget as it's requested at this point, that we will be in a position to be able to begin recalling many of our teachers that we had to provide notice to. We also do have a warrant article later in the town meeting to be considered for the establishment of a special education stabilization fund. Special education costs are very fluid and unpredictable, and in the past, the Norfolk Public Schools have retained, with the permission of the advisory board, one placeholder in our budget for special education that would allow us to immediately respond to a new student that may move into the district who has unique needs, who might be outplaced in a private setting. So we've always retained that placeholder with the permission of the advisory board under the agreement that at the end of the year, if we didn't need it, we would return it to the town. What we are asking to do instead, because we know and expect that the next several years' budgets are going to be very challenging. This is just the beginning of what could be a long process of recovery. So we are asking the town to establish a special education stabilization fund, which we will be funding fully from the school side with savings that we were able to accrue during the closure. So we would be putting $250,000 of our savings into a set-aside fund that would allow us to respond to unexpected special education costs without coming back to the town to a town meeting for another appropriation. There is significant oversight of that stabilization fund, so we can't just draw on it independently. It would require, if we want to transfer, it would require a vote of the school committee and then a second vote of the select board. But it would provide the town protection, and it would allow us in future years not to add $100,000 to our operating budget in the anticipation of costs. We'd have a fund that we could go to if costs occurred. So I think it's a more conservative approach and would provide protection for the town for many, many years. As Blythe said, at this time we are not asking for additional funding. We are asking the town to appropriate the funds in our budget as it's printed in the warrant. The reason for that is we are able to absorb some of these reductions next year due to the unique way that school is going to be reopening. After that, as of next year, we're going to have to come back to the town to restore some of these positions. We are expecting enrollment growth. We are going to have a bigger ask next year. And the revenue picture for the town may not improve. So at that time, we may need to draw on stabilization or other reserve funds where we may not this year. There's a lot of advocacy going on around the state. People have been asking what they can do. Reach out to your state representatives. The select board, the school committee, and the advisory board considered a motion or a resolution to encourage the state to fully fund Chapter 70. That will be the most dramatic impact on budgets for both us and for King Philip. So at this time, again, thinking about the long-term financial health of the district and our ability to maintain outstanding programs, we're asking you today to support the budget as printed with the understanding that next year we are going to have a higher ask and the revenue picture may not change. So we may need additional support and resources from the town going forward to continue to support our programs. So thank you very much for coming out today, and I'll turn it over to KP. I'm happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Interesting times that I have to wait for the mic to be sterilized before I can come forward. But for those of you who are watching that, you may have also noticed that he lowered it considerably from where Dr. Hilardi had the microphone. For those of you in the cheap seats in the back, I'm sorry. Welcome, everybody. I want to reiterate everything that Dr. Hilardi said around our appreciation for all of you coming out to support us today and support the budget and that process. And I also want to acknowledge our moderator who thanked us for our hospitality. But I want to emphasize to all of you, this is your home. King Philip High School is your high school. And I'm glad for some people who don't have students who are directly connected here, you may not have the opportunity to come here that often. So I'm so glad that you get to come home today and see another part of your community. Although we're not physically located in Norfolk, this high school is your high school, and we're so glad that you could be here today and participate in this meeting. Blythe and Ingrid have already said quite a bit about the budget, so I don't want to restate that because I know it's warm and I know you're hoping that I will be quite brief. But I want to just share a couple of things so that people are really clear about King Philip's budget. Because in many ways it's very similar to what goes on with our elementary budget, but in some ways it's quite different. Our process really begins in earnest in January when we get the governor's budget. The governor shares with us what his thought is regarding state aid, what he's proposing the state fund education at. We use those figures to then determine what our revenue is for King Philip and what our overall cost will be. And the difference between those two is what we ask the three communities to come forward with. So our primary revenue is from the three towns, but about 25% of that comes from state aid. And so we get that kind of feel in January. Normally, that's the floor. What we see happen is the legislators at the state level debate, they add additional amendments, they fund a few things at a little higher rate, and we get even a higher amount come June and July. You've already passed the budget that corresponds with that. In this particular case, the state is not even close to being able to come forward with a budget because of the many difficult decisions they have to make and the lack of certainty they have at the state level regarding what their income will be. The three towns have been very generous. As you've already heard our town manager and you've heard Dr. Lottie state, we have been in contact with all three towns. We shared our initial budget proposal, which was a level service budget asking for a 3.5% increase to the budget. The three towns discussed that with us, and we were able to come back and look at a 2.5% increase. That looks different for each town. And in fact, this year, Rentham was the town that really got hit hardest. To give us an overall increase of 2.5%, Rentham's assessment had to go up by almost 6%, 5.9%, where Norfolk's this year is only going up by 0.2%. We are very pleased with the generosity of the three communities, and if today that budget is voted, and we have two of our three communities voting the same budget, we will at least have the state, the town allocation locked in. For us, the problem comes in that we don't know about the state level. And again, it's crucial for us to be thinking about that piece of it. we've heard anywhere from level funding to a 20% cut. Norfolk recognized that, and the elementary state aid comes directly to the town. So when they were calculating this very conservative budget, they were calculating with the idea that they may take a hit at the state with the state aid. For King Philip, because we're considered a municipality, because we service all 3 communities, state aid comes directly to us. So the budget that you're looking at today is based on what we believe state aid would be back in January. And we don't have updated figures on that. So our problem is we have to brace for anywhere from a 5 to 20% decrease in state aid. And so some of you heard that about 2 weeks ago we had to notify almost 40 of our teachers that they may not have a position next year. That's because there's so much uncertainty with the state budget. It is not because of the generosity of the 3 towns. We appreciate the communities, we appreciate what you're doing to support us. It's our uncertainty around the state aid that has caused us to take that action. Additionally, our contract requires us to notify those people if there's a possibility that they will not be back. Just because 40 people received a notice does not mean that 40 people will not be back even under the worst situation. We just don't know where the dust will settle as this all plays out. And so we had to, in good conscience, notify them of the possibility. We have made no final decisions, even if a cut has to be made, what that looks like, and so there are no programs that have currently been cut. We will have to look at all of that as this unfolds. The other uncertainty is, again, what it will cost for us to reopen. Dr. Lottie and Ms. Robinson mentioned to you that we heard just a couple of days ago some preliminary guidance about reopening and that there might be financial impact to that. Yes, there is a grant that would perhaps bring us upwards of $450,000, which sounds like a great deal of money. But because there are so many uncertainties with opening, we don't know what those new costs will be. And for example, one of the things that they haven't shared with us yet is transportation. We currently spend $1 million in transportation, and although the state is supposed to reimburse us 100% of that, they have not reimbursed us close to 100% of that, even in good times. And so we can't count on that under these circumstances. If, in fact, we can no longer put 2 students per seat in the bus, and we have to only put 1 student per seat in the bus, and we bring all of our students back in September, we've just doubled the fleet, doubled the cost for transporting students. That cost is $1 million for KP. So you can see the kind of uncertainty that we are faced with right now, and each day we look for more information and try to get closer to a final understanding of what this all looks like. But because of that uncertainty, we were sorry to have to share with a few teachers that that was the situation. But again, today it's about what Norfolk is allocating, and I can't stress enough how grateful King Philip is for the generous request that is out here for you to consider today, and to assure you that this is the request that King Philip needs. And if we receive this, at least 75% of our budget will be known, because Rentham and Norfolk will have passed the same allocation amounts, and we will be able to move forward. With that, I say thank you, and I will be available when the time comes to answer any questions that people may have.
Thank you. Okay, so again, this is what we're going to do going forward. In the handout called Preliminary Budget, on the second page, it lists several large categories of government. I'm going to be reading each one of those categories and pausing in between in case you want to hold an item in that category. If you want to know which line items are in those categories, it is in the pages that follow. Some of them are self-explanatory, others perhaps a little less so. So that is how I'm going to proceed, and let's see how we do with that. So, general government. We have a hold here on general government. Any other holds on general government? Public safety. Education. Hold on education. Thank you. DPW. No holds. Human services. Culture and recreation. No holds. Employee benefits and insurance. Debt service. Exempt debt. Okay, so I believe we had holds under education and general government. Okay, so we'll now be discussing those. Mr. Rosenberg, I believe you had the hold on general government. The mic is yours.
Thank you. I'm David Rosenberg, 123 North Street. And the reason for the hold was I just have a question about information technology. I'd like to know if there are any information technology projects or activities other than general maintenance that are included in information technology.
Ms. Robinson or Mr. Lindmark?
The short answer is no. This budget has been reduced largely because we had a part-time IT person that we are not filling next year. This budget for expenses includes such things as providing the town's website, email addresses for all officials, backup software, all those sorts of nuts and bolts to keep IT running every day. If we were going, we will possibly consider capital expenses in the fall to replace computers and such, but that's not in this budget now.
I believe the only other hold was with respect to education. Sir, come and identify yourself and chat with us.
Arlie Sterling, 50 Fruit Street. First of all, thank you all very much for the detailed explanation of the budgets, and I really appreciate the demanding times under which they were made. And I should start this by qualifying myself. I don't have any kids in the schools now. But in the midst of this emergency, we've put the kids through such incredible stresses and demands, shifting the entire educational curriculum around for most of them. How can we have done that without spending more money? How can we cope with all the changes that we've put the kids through and trim what was, as I understood, approximately 3 or 4% increase down to less than 1%? I just don't understand how the needs of the kids are being met by this budget.
Either or both Dr. Ilardi or Mr. Zinni want to address that question? And thank you, Mr. Sterling. It's good to see you.
Thank you for the question, and it definitely has been a very, very challenging year for our staff and for our students. We have a couple of things that we're looking at for next year. One is, as I mentioned, we will be reopening in a very different way than we have ever provided education before. So there are some positions that we would absolutely critically need if we were operating as we typically would. As I mentioned, there's a position that we are not filling for a technology specialist. We do not anticipate next year, given the DESE guidance and the parameters around safety, that our students will be able to visit the makerspace or computer lab or share equipment. We also were able to save some funding during the course of this year because of the closure, because of reductions. We renegotiated transportation contracts because we were not providing transportation services. We were required to furlough some of our staff in food service and childcare because we were not operating those programs and we're not allowed to operate them. So we've been able to use some of those savings to do what we're recommending today, which is fund the Special Education Stabilization Fund. We were also able to mitigate some costs for next year by pre-buying technology that would have been in our budget. And we have some one-time costs that we were state funding. Between all of those things, we will be, with this appropriation and hopefully with additional revenue from the state, be able to mitigate that for 1 year. But as I said, next year, we won't be able to do those. We won't be generating savings from the closure, hopefully, and we will need to come back with a bigger ask. So that's where we are at the elementary level. Paul?
Mr. Zinni, anything to add here?
Thank you so much for that question, and I do want to emphasize a couple of things. One, these are unprecedented times. We know right now that the state is faced with a possible 20 to 25% cut in their revenue. And every single department at the state level and at the town level is in need of full funding. There's only so much revenue to go around. And so King Philip does feel strongly that it's important for us to do our part as well. We come to you during good times and ask you to be generous and help us to expand our programs. But during difficult times, we also have to recognize that we have to be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. And so your allocation, based on a level service budget from the state, is only 1% less than what we asked for initially, with the state coming out with some new grants for support around the unintended costs that we may have to open the schools. Assuming state aid comes in appropriately, this is a very appropriate allocation from your community, and we're very grateful for that. I also have to remind you that this is one of 3 allocations, and while Norfolk may be able to look at supporting us in a different way, Plainville next week will be going to the voting booths to vote on an override because their budget is in such significant despair. And Rentham has already voted a 5.9% increase from last year's budget to this year's budget. So the other 2 towns that support our budget are not in a place that could match the increase should you try to vote an increase today for us. So we have to recognize where King Philip is coming from the 3 communities at this point. Our biggest concern will be, again, state aid. And if we have a big hit to state aid, then we might be coming back to all 3 communities and saying, we need all 3 communities to come back with a special town meeting and look to see if there's some way that they can support us at that time. But that variable is still unknown, and the other 2 towns are not prepared to support that kind of change.
Thank you, Mr. Zinni. Mr. Lawrence.
Hi, John Lawrence, 17 Chickadee Drive. Question for Mr. Zinni. Awesome that, I think I heard you said across the board at the KP level there's a 2.5% increase, which is fantastic. My question is, if you parse out the dollars that are being spent on fixed contracts for teachers as part of unions that have already been negotiated, health insurance, which is obviously something that's above and beyond most anyone's control, and then special ed, what portion of that 2.5% is effectively absorbed by that? And then how much of that 2.5% is effectively left, if any at all, for other ancillary benefits and services for students?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question correctly. Are you asking what percentage of our budget overall is fixed versus discretionary?
I guess, yes, possibly. Of what portion, if you look at the 2021 versus 2020, what portion of any increase is fixed as a result of those 3 specific categories?
I think there's so much variability that it's going to be hard to answer that question, but I'm so very grateful for Mr. Azer, who might be able to maybe give you a little bit more specifics because he knows every single number by heart. But I will give you one example of something that's happened. Over the last 2 years and projecting into next year, we have been able to relook at our special education services and build programs internally to keep many of our students in the district rather than looking at costly out-of-district placements. And so as our students have aged out of out-of-district placements, we have not had an influx of new students going in. And so by the end of next year, we will have seen our special education costs go down by at least 34% from where they were when I arrived. That money internally can then be moved to other areas to support those areas. So we're constantly looking at where we've maybe over budgeted in one place because we anticipated the needs this year for that, but didn't necessarily spend that, and move them to another location so that we can keep the overall request down for all of you. Most of our contracts are looking at a 2 to 2.5% increase. And again, everything is on the table right now. We recognize that if we get hit hard by the state, we may have to have some difficult conversations in a lot of directions. We just can't have those yet because we don't know what amount of money we're looking to compensate for. And I don't know if that really answers your question.
Oh, that answers it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll just answer that a little bit real quick. If you're talking about fixed costs in terms of salaries, facilities, transportation, technology, all those things, what's left is essentially discretionary costs, which are supplies and materials. Out of a $35 million budget, that's about $1 million for us, so maybe 1/3%. So out of the 2.5% increase, the amount of that is going up is almost barely zero. because we knew we had to come in with a responsible and realistic budget. So we don't really have any increases in those line items. So really the only increases that are accounted for in that 2.5% increase are salaries and fixed costs. Thanks.
Sir?
Hi, Jonathan Smith, 26 Robin Road. My question is a little more mechanical. Based on when you're going to find out when state aid is and when you start the year, are you going to need to come back in August? This is for both schools. Are you going to need to come back in August instead of November in order to change your budgets?
I'll certainly let Dr. Alati speak to the elementary piece of that. I wish I had a better answer for you. I will tell you that normally the state has they're at least debating a budget by this point. Because the state is so uncertain as to what they will look like, we've been told that for our state dollars, we need to prepare for a 1/12 budget. That means they will be giving us 1/12 of the allocation we received last year for each month that we start our new fiscal year for. And we've been told to prepare for that for at least July and August. There's hope that maybe by September or October the state would have a final budget, but I can't speak for the state people, but these are the things that we're hearing. For the high school, the middle and high school level, and especially the high school level, we need to know by middle August what our classes will look like because our students choose specific courses. It's not where we just assign them, this is your, at the middle school you assign them a team and you have an English class and a history class. At the high school, our students choose AP Biology, or they choose physics or calculus. Those courses, if we don't have staff to run them, have to be removed from the course of studies booklet, and students have to get a different course and be placed in it. And once the school year begins, we can't change that. I honestly have no crystal ball to tell you what the state aid piece will be. And I'm hopeful that the state has always put education as a top priority, so I'm hopeful that we're budgeting for the worst case scenario and that we'll at least get some guidance from the state as we move into August to say that even if we don't have a budget, we're not expecting state aid to be cut by more than this percent, and then we can move forward with that. But I honestly don't know. I've been in education for 33 years, and I've never been in such a confusing time for trying to plan. And so I can't give you a better answer than that. All I can tell you is, for today, the budget that you have on the table from the town was appropriately constructed and is what we would need under normal circumstances. The rest, I don't have a better answer for you, and I'm sorry for that.
Anything to add, Dr. Lardy?
Very much. So as Paul said, we will have a better picture of what the state revenue looks like. There's tremendous advocacy happening across the Commonwealth, the Mass Teachers Association, many local town boards advocating for increased funding for education. We do expect that we will continue to see that. We can't guarantee it, but we're hopeful. At the Norfolk elementary level, we are hopeful with what we have now that we will be able to manage some of those costs, as I mentioned, with some savings that we had from opening and some careful planning. If we were not able to do that, or if we were to incur significant costs that were unexpected over the summer, we would come back to the town in September at your special town meeting and be advocating for funding, because our primary goal is to provide strong educational services, not lose staff, not lose programs. So we would be able to do that in September if necessary. We're not asking for it now because we don't know that it would be needed. If we were asking for it now, it would clearly result in cuts to other departments and services to citizens, or you would have to consider using stabilization funds, which we think for the long-term financial health of the district, we may need in future years. So we would be waiting on state aid. We're hopeful that that money will come in and that the state will fund the critical shortfall that towns are seeing in revenue. If not, we would be able to come back to town meeting in September and advocate for additional funding for schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Sir?
Rick Clement, 40 Barnstable. Thank you very much to the school representatives. I had some significant challenges to the numbers presented. If you're supportive of them, then as am I. I have a question for, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. As you presented, no, the woman next to Kevin. Sorry.
Ms. Robinson?
Blythe, thank you. Blythe, when you presented the figures for the school, you talked about the number of students departing our district and going to other funded schools. What I didn't hear is the population increase or decrease due to the kids aging out of our schools versus the kids coming up into our schools, as well as the population increase due to the developments within the town, and the projected population increases within the town because of the new developments that are a highly contested matter in town that I'm not going to bring up here. But I have concern about the population entering our school systems in the coming years, and I don't know that I heard how that is impacted. All I heard was we've got more students leaving and we're appropriating money away.
That's a very good question, which I'm going to immediately turn over to Dr. Alardi, because I know that the school very closely studies those trends, and she can help you with that.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we have commissioned an outside agency, and we have done 2 enrollment projection studies. If all the current projects that are pending go forward, we're expecting a significant increase in enrollment over the next 5 years at the elementary level, up to 250 students. We have had a space study committee that has done significant work. We have come forward at the select board meeting, I think back in November, to present the potential of a building expansion project at the Freeman Kennedy. And we have, with the select board's approval, submitted an application for state cost share in funding that kind of project. So we're watching it very, very closely. Again, that's another reason that I think protecting stabilization, if we have to add staffing to accommodate this enrollment in tough budget years, is important to think about. But we are planning for that, and we are watching those numbers very closely. If you're interested, the presentation on the space study is on our front page of our website, and you can see all the enrollment projection data and the demographic data that our data specialist provided. Thanks.
Mr. Zinni.
Yeah, let's keep calling attention to this, shall we? just a little footstool over here for me. So at the middle high school level, because Norfolk is only a third of the population, I can tell you that our projections right now are looking somewhat flat. And so for the next few years, we can absorb some small increases at the middle high school because of the way of those electives that we mentioned, where kids can take a variety of classes. We can spread that out. The tricky piece is this year, because we're getting mandates around how many students, or how far apart students have to be when they're in the classroom. That's the tricky part for us for this fall, because we have class sizes that traditionally are bigger than what we could accommodate based on what the recommendation was on Thursday for us. So that's going to be tricky to open this fall. A class of 35 will never fit in a classroom when we have to have 3 to 6 feet of distancing, and so we may have to split that in 2. That means 2 teachers teaching that class rather than 1, 2 locations. So for the fall, it's going to be tricky for us, but over the next 5 years, as I said, our projections by looking at the 3 communities is fairly flat, and as I said, we can absorb that when we go back to a traditional model.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else at the mic and no other holds, it's time for a vote on the omnibus budget. We'll do that again by a show of hands. It is a simple majority vote. All those in favor of the budget as presented, raise your hand. All those opposed? Overwhelming majority passes the annual budget. The next item, given the consent calendar passage, is Article 8. I believe Mr. Lutz is making the motion under Article 8.
I move to indefinitely postpone Article 8.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Lutz, a little explanation.
This article would authorize capital purchase during the upcoming fiscal year from operating funds. Currently, the town is proposing no capital purchases, though there may be some proposals to be considered at the fall town meeting.
Any questions or discussion under Article 8? Seeing none, it is, requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? It passes by a majority vote. It is indefinitely postponed. Article 9, Mr. Lutz.
I move to indefinitely postpone Article 9.
Seconded.
Mr. Lutz.
Similar to the previous article, this would authorize capital purchase during the upcoming fiscal year using debt financing. At this time, however, the town is now proposing no capital projects or purchases, again, though there may be some proposals to be considered at fall town meeting.
Questions, comments on Article 9? Seeing none, all those in favor of indefinite postponement, raise your hand. All those opposed? It is indefinitely postponed. Ms. Klein, Article 10, Special Education Reserve Fund.
I move to accept Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, S13E, and to establish a special education reserve fund for the Norfolk Public Schools to be utilized for unanticipated or unbudgeted special education costs, out-of-district tuition or transportation, and further to transfer $250,000 from the FY2020 Norfolk Elementary School budget to provide an initial amount to the Special Education Reserve Fund. This amount was altered from $100,000 to $250,000.
Seconded.
Seconded. So discussion, Ms. Klein, I believe this is what Dr. Ilardi was discussing a little bit further, and any presentation here from you?
Each year, the school budget has included a line item for special education costs, which are mandated by law. Can everyone understand me? You can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, excuse me. Because these costs are not optional, meaning special education is not an optional spend, the federal government requires that you pay for it. In certain years, higher, and other years lower, depending on actual students' needs. By setting up a revolving fund, these costs can be better managed. In years when the costs are lower than the fund balance, it will roll over into future years and help mitigate the effect on another year's budget.
Questions?
I would like to point out one more time that the money that is being used to initially start this revolving fund are savings from the 2020 operating budget that was already given to the Norfolk Public Schools. So instead of them returning it and we certify it and add it back in, they're just going to keep it and start this fund so that next year and in ongoing years, it does not need to be part of the budget.
So not new taxation
It's
for
not
this
new
money?
taxes, it is not new money, it is not any new items in this year's budget. It means absolutely nothing for this year's budget. Any questions?
Questions on Article 10? Sir, Mr. Sterling.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In my experience on the advisory board, revolving funds never increase transparency, particularly as they had to do with the school budget. I think the town has adequate mechanisms for dealing with these funds and don't see any need for a revolver.
Dr. Ilardi, I believe there is a bit of a check and balance built into this statute in terms of how funds are approved, but I'll let Dr. Ilardi discuss. Just a little closer, Dr. Ilardi, thank you.
Sorry again. So the stabilization fund does have significant oversight. We can't withdraw from it without a public vote of the school committee as well as a public vote of the select board. Again, anytime we would incur additional costs, we would do the best we could to manage them within our own operating budget. It's only when we can't close that gap that we would have to go both before the school committee for a vote and then to the advisory board. So it's not like other operating funds that are under
Select board, correct, not the advisory board? I think you just...
I'm sorry, the select board and the school committee. So it's not like another revolving account that we would have sole discretion over oversight.
Thank you. Any further questions on this fund? Nicole? It's hard to tell who people are with the masks. I'm normally a little better with names, but got that one right.
I'm sorry, Nicole Cleesby, 8 Wampanoag. Wondering if someone can speak towards what the overall size or cap of this fund is, as well as if there is a cap on a given year that can be invested, or if it's just whatever's remaining in the budget goes directly into that.
I think Ms. Robinson maybe can speak to that. It's not like a true revolving fund where we set a limit annually. I believe it's money in, money out, but I'll let Ms. Robinson discuss.
By state law, you can't have any more than $250,000 in the fund, so we're starting with that. And then if monies are spent during the year, we can add to it in a future year to keep it at a certain level or let it go down. That'll be a decision by town meeting.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments, Article 10. There's a mic right up here if you like. It's up to you. Sure.
Hi, Ellen Moynihan, 48 North Street. I might have missed this, and I apologize if I did. I don't understand the need for the increase. So if it was $100,000 previously, what is the need to have it increased to $250,000?
Ms. Robinson?
As Dr. Ilardi mentioned, we have some recent advice that there's a greater need for an increase in special education needs, this next year, and the school had identified some savings that they had this year. For example, the transportation costs were able to be renegotiated. They've asked that we increase the amount going into the fund initially to $250,000, and we support that.
Okay, so it's based on a specific anticipation of additional need.
We had planned to put initially $100,000 in, but as we've gotten closer to today, learned this new information about the amount of children that we need to serve, and also realized that the schools had some savings this year that they could use towards this, and so that's why the increase to $250,000. We don't need to spend $250,000 perhaps, but it's there if we do.
I just want to make sure I don't have any problem with spending it if it needs to be spent. It's just at an unprecedented time. I just want to make sure it's not something that it's nice to have it here when other things are, there's a danger of other things.
I appreciate your point, and I would say that these are critical expenses when they come. Dr. Ilardi's lining up well behind you to answer any specifics that might give you more comfort on this one.
Okay, and again, I just want to make clear, I don't have a problem with the money being spent. I just want to make sure that there's an identified need.
I'm not, if you're asking if I'm concerned that there are other needs going unmet, the answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, comments on Article 10? Come on up.
Hi.
My name is Josephine Kardahi. I live at 53
If you
Seacon
just
Street.
speak up just a tiny bit.
My name is Josephine Kardahi. I live at 53 Seacon Street in Norfolk. I'm an advanced practice registered nurse. I'm also a school nurse for one of the schools being funded and run by the Department of Children and Families. I recently sat in on a call from DESE, and children that are on the IEP or special needs students have been identified as the most critically students in need during this unprecedented time. They are anticipating, or they are first in line for in-school instruction, and there are two other models that schools have to prepare for, and that would be for the hybrid model and for the virtually remote model. So I do anticipate, based on the guidelines that were released a couple of days ago, that our special needs students will be attending school in person, and they have been identified as students with the most need. So in light of that, I'm in support of it.
Thank you very much for that information. Any other questions, comments on Article 10? Good discussion. Seeing no further comments, this requires a simple majority vote. That's correct, Mr. Mello, correct? Correct. And that's because normally when we create stabilization funds, new ones, it's a 2/3 vote, but this is under a special statute. I believe it's just a simple majority vote. So all those in favor of creation and funding of this stabilization fund, raise your hands. All those opposed? It is a vote. It passes by a clear and overwhelming majority. There is no reports that I'm aware of under Article, oh, actually, under our, right, you're going to discuss under your motion. Right, got it. So there are no reports that are going to be made this morning, so we are going straight to Article 12, which is a general bylaw change, and the motion is going to be made by Jonathan Smith.
I move to approve Article 12 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Smith, you can give us an explanation.
The point of this article is that the warrant that you received in the mail for this meeting be also done for special town meetings. Right now, you just get a postcard in the mail saying, oh, there's going to be a meeting in a week or two, and if you want to make the effort, you can go to the website of the town and then go to a sub-website or a subcategory to try to find out what's going on. I think what's going on this year with the potential of 2 special town meetings in the fall, I think you really need to know what's going on ahead of time and have something right in front of you. It's too easy to take a postcard and just throw it away or think that it's another one of those come-ons. To have a warrant in front of you with the advisory board recommendations, I think is critical for you to be able to make informed decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any question? Ms. Klein?
Hi. Yes. The advisory board took this under consideration. We have actually taken this under consideration multiple times over the years. The problem that we have with this is that it says shall and must. That means that under no circumstances can we not print a warrant for you, which means if the town is in a pandemic and we're trying to save money, we're still required to print and mail a warrant to every single resident versus printing 250 copies and leaving them at the library and at town hall and at Walgreens and any other common areas around town that you could easily pick up when you were out and about during the day. And also, go to any website, view it online, saves paper, saves printing, saves the environment. It's not that we don't want to print the warrant. I want to be clear about that. We do want to print the warrant, and when times are not tough, we will. Or when there's enough information that we feel like it's outside the norm or the scope of what, like this type of meeting, where there's revolving funds and zoning articles and budget reviews, we would print a warrant. It's just the problem we have with shall and must and hints. I understand that this year, and we would absolutely take that into consideration during the special town meeting. It's not a bylaw that we print a postcard at that time. It's simply that we choose to before each town meeting, whether or not we choose to. We would take that into consideration. But if you vote yes to approve this, it means that forever we have to print it, no matter what. We can't change that. So we, as the advisory board, feel that it should be left up to the advisory board and the amount of information that is needed and is going to be printed in a warrant about whether or not we print it and mail it. Those are significant costs to the town to do that. We feel it's important to do, but unfortunately not every town meeting for the next 15 years do you need a warrant mailed to you. Thank you.
So I take that as not supported by the advisory board.
Correct. The advisory board took this under consideration. We debated very, very in-depthly about this, about the different impacts on the environment and the impacts of the cost to the town and how we would make the decision going forward. We would also welcome public comment at any of our meetings. I mean, our meetings are notoriously unattended. You're welcome to come before and say, hey, I'd really like you to consider printing the warrant. We would have no objection to that. We just don't feel it needs to be written into a bylaw requiring that the town of Norfolk spend this amount of money every single year, twice a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, comment?
Fran Sullivan, 123 Margot Way, Norfolk. Could someone tell us how much it costs to print the warrant and mail it to, I don't know how many homes in the town?
Thank you. It's a very good question. Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, Sue Jacobson. So the cost to mail the warrant this year was about $757. The printing of the warrant was about $1,500. And each year it goes up. The printing costs go up, the postage goes up. However, this is a very light warrant. I think a longtime serving member, Arlie Sterling, can attest to the fact that over the last 10 years that I've been doing this, it's cost us significantly more because, you know, the heavier the articles, the more expensive it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenberg.
David Rosenberg, 123 North Street. I'm strongly in favor of increased citizen engagement in town government and town decision-making. Increasing citizen engagement isn't easy. I don't have wonderful answers for it. And I think that what we need to do is try various things. If they work, great. If they don't work, then try something different. I think that printing the warrant and making sure that everybody has it is a move toward increased citizen engagement. I noticed that this year's warrant is printed on lower quality paper. Seems to be sort of newsprint paper rather than something closer to bond paper. So steps like that to decrease the cost are certainly valid, but I think it's important to get the warrant into people's hands. Let's see, one other thing. For those reasons, and with a desire to increase participation, I support this article. I also think that the reason that we have bylaws is to direct what we want. And if we didn't have town bylaws, we could let any committee or board decide to do whatever it wanted. I don't question the decisions of boards, but I do think that there is a value in setting the town's intention by putting it in bylaws. If this doesn't work, the bylaw can be changed, but we ought to give this a try. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. On my left.
Hi, Jeff Berkner, Wampanoag Avenue. Mr. Moderator, I was wondering, I was asking for a clarification of residents. Is this sent to each household based on the list of town residents? Or would this be sent to all households based on the list of registered voters who could attend town meeting? I think there might be a considerable savings if we were to send it to just the people who were
Ms. Jacobson.
registered to attend town meeting.
It is sent to all residents, and the number that we receive comes directly from the post office. So it's sent to each and every home.
Registered or not registered?
Correct. So it would be difficult to try to identify who's going to come to town meeting and only mail it to those homes, I think.
Jay?
Ms. Robinson.
I would also point out that with the mailing to every household, we take advantage of the town's bulk postal permit, and if we were to mail it just to registered voters, we might not enjoy that lower cost. I don't know what the difference would be. I would just say it's something we would need to investigate.
Thank you. Mr. Fronczak.
Arthur Fronczak, 14 Main Street. Served on the advisory committee. There was a comment about, you know, perhaps we can try this and see if it boosts attendance. It's been tried. It hasn't. I mean, this thing comes up every couple of years, and we have the same discussion. And I mean, I appreciate that there are people who might prefer to get this, and there are people who equally are thinking very strongly that it's just a waste. And I just hope that people consider what's best for the town as opposed to their individual preference. I mean, the reality is, I've noticed people are doing more things online. Am I the only person who's noticed this? So I understand that a couple $1,000s might not seem like a lot of money, but again, it's just something where this does not seem to change attendance, whether we print the warrant or whether we don't. It seems to be what's on the warrant that drives attendance. Just speaking for myself, this issue came up at the advisory committee, and if somebody really wants a printout, you have an option. You could go to the library, you could go to town hall. The question is, how many thousands of warrants are we printing out and people don't show up. I mean, so I appreciate while there might be some benefit, I think that the overall benefits and direction of going and leaving it to the discretion of the advisory committee makes a lot more sense to me. Thank you.
It's something new, Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to build on the point that Blythe Robinson made about taking advantage of the town's bulk mailing to mail to all residents. Another advantage of that is people who are residents but not registered voters might well receive the warrant, look at it, and decide that it's worth becoming a registered voter so that they can vote at the town meeting. So I see that being an opportunity for building more participation by people who are not currently registered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, anything to add?
I would only note that the comments made about how you can just go to the library or whatever don't really apply if we get phase 2 of the pandemic. Those things aren't open. They won't be able to get it. Thank you.
Yes, sir, we understand that. That's why we printed this warrant. We wanted to make sure that no one had to leave their house to get this information. No one had to go to the library or town hall. During a pandemic, we would absolutely always print the warrant. We are speaking about a bylaw change that would affect us forever. We are not speaking about one that affects us during a pandemic. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Good debate. Seeing no one else at the microphones, this is a simple general bylaw amendment, so it only requires a majority vote. All those in favor of the bylaw change, raise your hand. All those opposed? It clearly does not pass. Overwhelming majority opposed to it. It is not a vote and is defeated. With the consent calendar items, that brings us to Article 20, which is a zoning amendment, and I believe Mr. Hurwitz is making the motion. 16? Hold on a sec. 13 was in the, hold on, I might have missed one. 16. Hold on. 16, I think was, no, 16 was not in. Thank you very much. Article 16, Mr. Hurwitz, I believe.
The advisory committee recommends approval of Article 16.
Seconded.
And that is a motion, correct? A motion to
Sorry,
approve it as,
move to approve Article 16.
and that's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hurwitz, explanation.
Yeah, this article will enable $50,000 from CPC funds to be allocated towards short-term rental assistance for town residents adversely impacted by current economic conditions. The need for assistance will be validated through an application process governed by the Norfolk Affordable Housing Committee. This allocation has no additional impact on household taxes or tax rates, and it is simply an allocation of funds from the existing CPC reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Hurwitz. I will state that I've worked on several of these programs in towns I work with, and by further explanation, it helps people for a short period of time, a few months, cover the gap between an affordable rent and what their lease might actually state. And a number of towns are moving towards this during the pandemic. I'll also note for the record that almost annually every year since I've been moderator, the CPA has voted to provide funds for expenditure by the Affordable Housing Trust. Any questions, comments? This requires a majority vote. Seeing no one at the mic, all those in favor of this, raise your hand. All those opposed? It does pass by a majority. That brings us to Article 20. Mr. Hurwitz, this is a zoning amendment.
I move to approve Article 20.
Seconded.
This article has been submitted and endorsed by the Planning Board. It is intended to best follow state 40B guidelines with respect to two-family houses, and the indirect highlighting of units designated as 40B, which may occur under this scenario.
Mr. Byron, from the Planning Board, anything to add here? I'll look for the Planning Board's recommendation.
I would just state that the planning board supports this, initiated it and supports this change to the bylaw, creating a two-family house within a development to make it look like all the other houses just doesn't work. And in addition, the state has decided that they would not support the article as it's currently written. So this change is appropriate to get state support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions on Article 20? Seeing none, this is a zoning amendment and requires a 2/3 vote. I'll try and do it by a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? It clearly passes by a 2/3 majority. Article 21, another zoning amendment. Mr. Hurwitz.
I move to approve Article 21.
Seconded.
Mr. Hurwitz.
The current Norfolk bylaw is in violation of the state's Fair Housing Act and needs the 2-bedroom limitation provision removed under the advice of the State Attorney General. Approving this article will allow Norfolk's bylaws to conform to state guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Hurwitz. Mr. Byron has noted to me that the planning board recommends and approves of this change. Any questions, comments on Article 21? Mr. Rosenberg.
Hi, my question is, what is this really doing? Can you please provide a little more explanation about what is in the current bylaw, what was found to be in violation of the state laws by the Attorney General, and how this change addresses that? Thank you.
I believe it's just taking out a bedroom count limit maximum. Is that correct, Mr. Byron? Yes, so it's just removing the maximum number of bedrooms that you could have in any such facility. There is no maximum, I believe. It shall not exceed the ratio of 16 bedrooms for any single lot except by special permit, but the limitation of 2 bedrooms per unit is being stricken. Is that correct? You are welcome. Seeing no further questions or comments on Article 21, it again requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? It passes by a clear 2/3 majority. Article 22 is a street acceptance. I had Ms. Klein. Don't jump the gun, Mr. Lutz. You got plenty of time.
This is a road acceptance. I move to approve Article 22 as printed in the warrant to approve
Seconded.
Nichols Way.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Klein, little explanation here.
Yep. This article is a general road acceptance. The road has recently been completed and is now ready to be turned over to the town. There's no cost to accept this road. It's just taking it from the developer or builder, whoever was maintaining the private way prior to this, to now it'll be a town road, maintained and operated by the town.
Questions, comments? Hold on. Yes, no? Coming? On my left.
Before we vote to accept, Jeff Bruckner, before we vote to accept this, I just want to make sure that the road satisfies all the requirements of the town in terms of layout, construction, width, whatever requirements the town has. Has someone looked at that?
I'm sorry, I really couldn't hear you.
So I think his question was, before he votes, to know if those that review these things have concluded that the road is up to town standards and is adequately constructed. I see Mr.
Correct.
Byron raising.
The planning board has examined the road as well as DPW and agreed that the road is ready for acceptance.
Thank you. Seeing no further people lined up at the mic, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? It clearly passes. Article 23, I've been informed that there's going to be no motion under it, so we will move to Article 24. Ms. Whitney? Come on up. You may, we're going to have to, knowing you, B, we might have to sterilize here afterwards, but yes, please.
After teaching for 39 years, I was quite used to a command audience, whether they like
Just
it
step a little closer to the mic, though,
or
Betsy.
not. Okay, well, that's why I was worried. Good, thank you. I move
So far, so good.
to approve Article 24 as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Whitney, I'll give you a brief chance to explain, and then I will seek the position of the planning board and the advisory board.
Now, Mr. Moderator, brief. Now, I have it, I've practiced, I can zoom through it, my dear, okay?
I know that brevity is not always your hallmark, Ms. Whitney, but I think I have faith in you.
But I do try, even at my age. Good afternoon. Elizabeth Whitney, 26 Valley Street, Pondville, 38 years. Thank you for hearing my comments, not that you had a choice, but I appreciate so much that you're listening to my comments regarding Citizens Petition, Article 24. That's my article. I appreciate your time and attention to this effort. My vision language, thankfully, in the annual town meeting warrant article booklet includes a recommendation of approval, thank you, from the advisory committee for zoning by special permit, residential zoning by special permit, as written in the article. When we moved to Norfolk long ago, our end of town was already zoned commercial industrial. Our historic house was grandfathered as residential, as were the few private homes near us on Hill Street and Old Pond Road. And zoning held consistent for many, many years. But we were residential within the context. Okay, so 2013 came along, and the time had come for change. A bylaw was presented at town meeting, Article 10, I remember it well. It provided for the option of residential development by special permit in the C1D district, but within a structure of specifics such as no single-family houses, quote, not less than and not more than a specific number of units per particular square footage, which is in the booklet. Absolutely have I supported this approach to residential growth in this area since its beginning. As I stated back then in 2013, and I'll say it again today, multi-unit residential does not automatically translate into multi-children. It doesn't, it didn't, and it hasn't. I have willingly supported this approach since the beginning. Studies have shown then and now that many professionals or newly graduated career seekers or single individuals for one reason or another, older individuals, retired individuals, prefer in many instances the townhouse style of home. Increased child population is not necessarily encouraged by these townhome style of buildings. In 2013, I don't really remember using the term off-highway very much, but I live off-highway on Valley Street. But the bylaw change of 2013 absolutely did pertain to off-highway in the C1D district. And what happened? Article 10 passed by an overwhelming vote of 61 to 16, and the voters represented all areas of Norfolk. I didn't run around banging on doors saying, go to the meeting and vote for it, whether you understand or not. I considered this fact quite significant, that it represented many, and I got the tape, that's how I know there were people from all over town who supported this bylaw change. So of course my logic is a good thing for a smaller neighborhood is a good thing for the larger whole, in my opinion. Well, now it's 2020. I have filed a citizen's petition, Article 24, for the purpose of rounding out the residential in a healthy and careful way, but limited to only some parcels on Pine Street, which is Route 115, and Dedham Street, which is Route 1A. It's not wide swaths of land. This bylaw change would again allow, and I underscore the word option, for the pursuit of residential, the pursuit of it. Not automatic, the pursuit of residential development by special permit after the appropriate vetting process. Now I'm getting closer. Residential coming to C1D is hardly anything new. And how do I know that? That it's a solid, constructive process? Because I've lived in the middle of it for 38 years. The last 7 years devoted to residential dwellings by special permit. I've observed applicants appear before the planning board to answer questions, to ask questions, to hear questions and comments from the board and from the public, which they should hear comments and opinions from the public. And I'll tell you, one thing is for sure, the process is careful and it's detailed. Resulting residential dwellings would have a good chance of really coordinating well with the neighborhood as a whole. And the tax benefit, as of right now, the townhouses across from our house produced, I'm just chasing this thing, the tax, approximately $68,000 tax benefit per year. I did call the tax assessor's office recently and I compared it to a commercial lot on nearby 6 Hill Street. It produces $9,600 in tax benefit per year, and on a far greater square footage plot of land. I have the field cards at home. I got a calculator, I added things up. What about so-called commercial and industrial? My article in no way affects commercial by right in the C1D district. However, and I've said this many times, in 2006, Shire Industrial Park off of Route 1A, last page, was built to provide an appropriate and spacious location for just about any kind of commercial and industrial business which would require heavy trucking, later or earlier hours of operation, storage of all types of equipment from small to large hauls, storage of materials, earlier and later lighting, and more. I rode through Shire Park again last week, and this still holds true, and there's lots of room. So we're not discouraging commercial development in our district area. My article asks that a long-time residential neighborhood in practice and in spirit, regardless of its commercial additions, at least has a chance to retain that particular character of residential, both off and on highway. All Norfolk residents would have the right to attend a planning board meeting and fight for their position. To end, in my book about the history of Pondville, I state that my goal and my dream regarding Pondville always was and still is to ensure a possibility of becoming again, as it once was, a neighborhood, but a tax contributing neighborhood, and that it also be acknowledged for its many contributions to the town of Norfolk as a whole. I wanted to help with its protection, its survival. Pondville has made its place in history, and indeed, past history is inherently hoping to see a successful future. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Do I-
Whitney. Mr. Byron, from the planning board. B, you could just want to stay close by to answer any questions.
Thank you. On the evening the planning board took its vote to support or not support this article, one of our 5 members was absent. The vote, it turned out to be 2 in favor and 2 against the article. I'm here to speak to the 2 that voted in favor. The map, which was provided on the handout to you, if you have it, shows the on-highway section outlined in red that we are talking about here in Betsy's citizens petition article. Those who voted in favor of it recognize that there's really only 3 lots that are economically viable to be developed around residences in this on-highway. And those are the ones down at the end of Valley Street and 115 there. Lots 2, 35, and 39 on your map. If there were housing in there, and by the way, there were private homes in 39 and 2, and 35, I believe, if I'm correct, Rich, if you're still here, is in front of the ZBA for 40B application. So there are only 3 lots down that end that lend themselves to having high-density housing that Betsy's proposing. And it complements the housing that's stretched along Valley Street and going up Hill Street as well. So we support it, and we think it's the right thing to do for the town. Thank you.
So that's two versus 2, so neither to recommend or not recommend, but just to explaining the position of the 2. I'd like to hear from the advisory board next before taking other comments.
I think that's me.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Sorry.
We'll get to that next. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. This article is asking for zoning by special permit in the Pondville area to allow on-highway residential development. It currently only allows off-highway residential buildings. The advisory committee agrees with the resident that to help with the need for more residential dwellings in Norfolk, changing this zoning will allow for further development in the area. This will not apply to single-family homes which are already disallowed in the area, nor does it affect the 40B statute in any way. 40B is already can do and build whatever they want, pretty much. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said it that way, but we'll talk about that later. This type of zoning change does not allow or disallow 40B. It's mandated by the state. The number of units will be mandated by the square footage of the yacht. So the advisory board agrees with the resident as well, and says that it's a small area, if it's what they want, and this is what will help their area be developed, then it also helps the town of Norfolk.
So that was a supportive recommendation by the advisory board. Do we have a vote of this other side of the coin from the planning board?
Hi, I'm Gary Searle. I'm on the planning board as well, and I'm one of the two people that...
If you could just either tilt that mic up or speak a little more directly into it.
I'm on the planning board as well, and I'm one of the two people that voted not to support this. In principle, I thought that there's an extremely narrow application of this change. As Walter stated, there's 11 lots, 3 of them are vacant. The vacant lots that are developable at this time are all owned by one developer. Perhaps one is a residential house that could be converted, but basically the property that needs to be developed is one developer. I'm all for changes that enable innovative approaches to developing parcels of land and improving neighborhoods. I'm not for narrowly focused changes that only benefit a few people and perhaps only one developer. We brought this up at the meeting, and myself and another planning board member, we asked if we could extend this same change across the C1 district, and it was a non-starter. No one wanted to entertain that, so we didn't consider it, and we only voted on this particular change that affected 11 parcels, 3 of which are empty. The other comment I guess I would make is on the whole citizens petition process. I won't say that it circumvents visibility, but
I really, I don't want a lot of commentary on that process. Let's stick to the bylaw.
I will just say that normally we would have open hearings, there would be public announcements, but as other people have mentioned, even in regard to other warrants tonight, there's been very little visibility by the town members at public meetings. Maybe that's because it's on Zoom or whatever. So in good conscience, I didn't feel that I should be voting for something where only a limited number of people, even inside of that area, may have known about this change, and none of the other developers in the C1 district or people in similar situations had been contacted. And for those reasons, and because we were not able to expand it at the planning board meeting, I voted not to support it.
Thank you. I've granted permission for a non-resident who owns or operates property in the vicinity to briefly, and he's promised to be brief, give his thoughts on this particular file. So introduce yourself. Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. My name is Nathaniel Hunter. I own 4 and 6 Hill Street. They're a commercial and residential property that actually directly abut this on-highway district where they're suggesting the change. And I can't strongly enough suggest that we do not approve this. Having separate residential and commercial districts is important. They don't coexist well. Businesses like to make noise. They like to have trucks. People like to have barbecues and have quiet. By forcing a situation where we have to coexist with more residences, it's just going to make businesses hard to run. Betsy was kind enough to point out that the difference in revenue from the houses to a business, but the difference between residential and commercial is guaranteed not to produce children in the school system, whereas residential may or may not. So there's a tax benefit to having businesses in Norfolk. We don't have enough as there is, and voting yes on this would be absolutely detrimental to running businesses in Norfolk. At least, about a third of the available commercial district would become non-viable. So I hope you take this into consideration when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Van Tine.
Carolyn Van Tine, 11 Wright Farm Road. Excuse me. All I'd like to say is that while I'm mindful of the fact that maybe this doesn't impact other areas of the town are certainly welcome in the future to make their own petition, either through a citizen's petition, through one of the many committees that can bring articles before the town, and that just because a petition only impacts a small number of people does not, I think, obviate the petition. The only other thing that I'd like to add is that I know that there's some folks for whom this is one of their first town meetings. It's not mine. I think that you've probably found, I actually really like the outdoor thing. It's very nice. But you learn a lot about the town when you come to town meeting. It's very social. People are going to mingle after, although my Jeep doesn't have its top, so I don't know how much mingling I'll do. In any event, one of the things that you will learn, and I know that you're not supposed to make ad hominem, or in this case, ad feminem attack. I'm not. One of the things that you will learn is that Betsy always does her research, as evidenced by her script, but that she also is always, whether I agree with her or not, and so let's be clear, I don't always agree with Betsy. This is one of the times that I do, but I always know that Betsy is coming to the mic absolutely convinced that what she is doing, supporting, is betterment of the town. That if it were only for her betterment and not the town at large, she would not do it. Now, that's just my opinion, and we all know about opinions, but I just wanted to echo that everybody in the town has the right to bring articles before the town if they feel that it's not fair that one section has now got more residential. Have at it. But the only one that's before us today, and it's been published, is this one, and so I'm voting in support.
Thank you. Mr. Beachkovsky.
Brian Beachkovsky, 94 Boardman Street. One of the things that I've seen on the advisory board or on the advisory committee is that there's been a few pushes for more residential use of the land, and one of the considerations that I'd like to bring up is that has a higher marginal or sales price for the land itself, and actually has been a factor in keeping more commercial from using the property because commercial options aren't as viable when land prices are increased to meet where residential could be. So I think there's an unintended consequence here of taking away some of the commercial properties that are remaining in town, that it will show that other commercial properties and business district properties, that land value can go up because we can change those bylaws as well to allow residential. So I actually see that I want more commercial and business in town, and by approving this, I think we're actually making it harder for that to happen because the land prices will price out commercial options. Thank you.
Thank you. On my left, and then we'll get to my right again.
Hi, I'm Rick Smith. I live on Everett Street. I've known Betsy for a long time. I've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. I've watched it over that period of time when it was very rural, very open to its current state. There's always been this little pull and tug going on in this neighborhood, and that's because it's residential, commercial, it's very cloudy, it always has been. And what Betsy has done is taken a neighborhood and gotten us all talking together, and we know each other as neighbors, which a lot of us can't say that, and unified us in a way that we want to see our neighborhood prosper, but at the same time, we also learned what our neighborhood's history was. And a lot of us had no idea of the history and how it was actually a cornerstone of the town at one time. That was the epicenter of Norfolk at one time, and then it moved out to its current state. So what she is actually doing, and I do support, is kind of redefining our neighborhood in a way that it gives it more of a family makeup with a mix of commercial, but there is control and balance between the two, and there's harmony. In its current state, there's a lot of tug, pull, the town's involved, and there's a lot of I don't knows going on. And I really think that her direction and the way that she's presented it is the way to go, and I would hope that you'd all support us in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Not sure which of you two were first, Mr. Lutz or this gentleman?
Hi, everyone.
Just get your name and street address.
Yeah. My name is Peter Schwalbe. I live at 58 Everett Street. Well, before I say any words, I just want to let you know that, like Rick, I live in the R3 district. It's very, very close to the C1 district that is being discussed today. Some prior comments about 4 and 6 Hill Street. Residential already exists there by special permit, and even before that, long-standing residents. The situation there is very unique, and as Rick said, there's a lot of push and pull there.
but I don't think it really is relevant to what is being proposed here today. I wholeheartedly support the bylaw amendment being proposed by residents in the C1D area, but to start out, I really want to underscore the human element of this discussion because the maps and zoning boundaries really don't do it justice. At the end of the day, this is about a community of citizens who want to have input positively in shaping their area in which they live and have invested so much of their lives and personal finances. At the same time, I do believe this proposal has benefits to the town as a whole, and I hope that what I outlay here will highlight that aspect as well. So many of you may know the C1D area specifically, as that's the place where Four Kicks Craft Beer Cellar, Aroma Pizza, and Pondville Medical Building are. You likely pass that way when you're on your way to Gillette Stadium, and then you go up the hill and it's all residential, right? But some may not be aware that C1D is also comprised of a significant level of both long-standing homes and new residential developments of townhomes and apartments. You would observe this if you turned left onto Valley, went up Old Pond Road, or drove up Hill Street towards the Everett area neighborhoods. I'm describing this because I want to make it clear the C1D area is a subset of the greater C1 district. It's not an industrial park like other parks in the C1 district. This proposal is not trying to shoehorn residential into a strictly industrial park area. It's historically residential today, and right now more or less equally comprised of residences and businesses. And those residences, including myself, love and support many of the businesses that are on highway there today. In addition to the residential components, there's significant historical value. As Betsy mentioned, this was originally Pondville, established in 1600s. And there's many historical markers in the area, some lost, some still there. The Pondville Cemetery is on the National Historic Registry of Historic Places, okay? I won't list other historical markers, but I'd encourage you to read Betsy's books and research on the area. I'm a newcomer to Norfolk, and I was astounded by the history that's present in my area. And personally, I don't want to see it slowly be, demolished as well. So I've painted a picture of C1D. It's mixed residential and commercial and has been for a very long time. But is it good for the town as a whole? I'd argue there are many pros to it. Some have been spoken to, some have not. I'll try to go through ones that haven't been spoken to. The bylaw is not removing commercial by right. We've said that, but it does present a special permit option. Options are always good when we're looking at undeveloped land. Not all the undeveloped land is owned by a single developer. That's an incorrect piece of information. 2, there's a proven market, and it's been tested and proven that there's a market for residential in this very small area. We've got townhomes and apartments. I think they're almost all sold, if not maybe one townhome not sold. Currently, they're 1 and 2 bedrooms, so the likelihood of families moving in, very low. Now, families, I learned today, are a protected class, and I think I'm a little bit tired about hearing about that as an argument when we talk about residential development. Families are okay, and they should come to Norfolk if they want to. If some new residential were to go up in the area, it would bring solid tax revenue. That's been pointed to. There's some costs involved, but net, generally, 4 new condos, a single commercial building, my bet would be on the new residential in terms of incremental tax revenue to the town. This does not invite 40B. 40B happens regardless of the zone or the bylaws. So this is not asking for 40B to come to that area of town. And as mentioned in the planning board meeting, which is also on public record, one of the senior-most members of the planning board did mention that Pine Street is already 90% residential. From a design and transitional standpoint on 115, the potential for residential off-highway on that north side of 115, the other side is where you see Four Kicks or you see Joffrin when you're earlier on your ride on 115. It offers a nicer design transition versus a commercial warehouse, that you suddenly, hit a commercial warehouse on 115 where you've passed all these beautiful neighborhoods on your way to Foxborough. So from a design standpoint, it's also very viable. So in conclusion, I've mentioned all the reasons why. But I think most importantly, this amendment has value because it was brought forth by citizens who wish to shape and improve the community in which they live. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Peter. Something new, Mr. Lutz?
I hope so. My name's David Lutz. I live at 15 Pondview Road in Norfolk. I'm also a member of the advisory committee. I unfortunately had to miss the meeting where this was voted on. Had I been in attendance, I would have voted no. I'm sorry, Betsy. I know we've been friends for a long time. There's a process for zoning articles to be adopted by the town that involves review by the planning board. At the time we had the meeting, it had not been before the planning board. The planning board has since voted, and admittedly it was a 2-2 tie, but they've since voted no. If the proponents of this would like to bring it forward through the normal zoning bylaw process, I encourage them to do so. Thank you.
One last person at the mic.
Sorry, I don't know that this will necessarily all be new. I didn't intend to speak today, but I feel very strongly about this. Bonnie McLaughlin, I live at 23 Campbell Street, but also own
If you
on
just
Hill
get a little
Street.
closer to the mic, thank you. Here you go.
Bonnie McLaughlin, I live on Campbell Street, but also own on Hill Street. Grew up on Hill Street before any of the commercial came in. I agree there can be, in many cases, a cohabitation between commercial and residential. Some of the types of developments that are commercial have been more preferable to that community than others. You know, we've been very fortunate with a lot of the commercial development that sort of goes to sleep at night, like the Pondville building. I was horrified when they began developing Valley Street, but as it became residentially developed, it actually is quite nice, and we look forward to having more neighbors in the community. So I just want to express that I also support this movement, and again, it doesn't preclude commercial development in any fashion. It simply allows more options, and so that there may be a choice that instead of commercial, they may have residential.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Ma'am, step right on up. It's like our last speaker. Come on. Absolutely.
Ellen Moynihan again. I had not anticipated asking my first question or this one, and it actually is a question more than a comment. Although this wouldn't impact, that it would not involve 40B development, is it true that anytime we add non-40B development to the town, that it makes it harder for us to reach our 10%?
That is true every 10 years. So in the next census, so this would go on the 2030 census, this would add to the denominator. What I don't know, and Mr. McCarthy, maybe tell me, is there a requirement for affordability within this kind of project? Is it a 10%? So above 10 units, if 10 units were done in this area, it would require 10%, so we'd be 10% affordability. So we'd be essentially keeping pace, but otherwise you're 100% correct. The more we add to the denominator, which is total housing units, the more we may slip behind if we don't have a corresponding offset with the number of affordable units added.
So I'm not opposed to this specific proposal, but I just ask that people keep in mind that every time there's a potential implication for adding more non-40B residences, that it may make it harder for the town to meet its 10% affordable housing requirement, which will have the result of just making our town more overcrowded, making our schools more overcrowded, and just losing some of the natural beauty of our town. So I just ask that everyone be thoughtful of that, even when a specific project doesn't contain 40B units.
Thank you very much. I have two quick things to say before we take a vote, and it will be a 2/3 vote. I too have known Ms. Whitney for a long time. I applaud her courage and investment in bringing this issue forward to the town, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's not easy to face a whole group of people with a complex idea and try and convince them that it's the right thing to do, and she does it full of heart and wisdom. So I appreciate that. Thank you, B. The next thing before we take a vote is, this is our last article. I'll take a motion to adjourn afterwards. I would appreciate it if we leave kind of row by row, starting with the rows on this side and working our way there, the crowd's already dwindled, so it should be pretty orderly. We have a good gap here, but please try and maintain some semblance of social distancing on your way out. Okay, this takes a 2/3 vote. It may be the closest vote of the evening. I have a couple people that can help me count the vote if we need to, but let's try and do it by a show of hands. All those in favor of Ms. Whitney's proposal, raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. Let me just do this with a standing. It's just a little easier for me to see. All those in favor of Ms. Whitney's proposal, please stand up. And all those opposed to this bylaw amendment, please stand up and stay standing for a moment. It's quite clear to me that it does not carry the requisite 2/3 in the approval. It does not appear to carry the majority. Unless 7 people rise to challenge that, then I'm declaring that it is not a vote. So not seeing 7, thank you very much. I will now, the article is defeated, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn town meeting.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very, very much for coming. 272 people on a hot morning in late June. That's terrific. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.